Just bought 2 tickets to get the ferry to Russel, just across the bay here. Russel has a reputation in the past of being a whole place of vice and drunkenness and disorder. That was about 200 years ago though, so maybe it's a bit more civilised now. Let's go and have a look. Upstairs. I've got no nautical idea actually. Upstairs. Going up on deck.
This 2-storey building, the supermarket or Russel Fresh, is the oldest corrugated clad building in New Zealand. That corrugation that you're looking at by an American writer, Zane Grey, 1926, right? And yes, it was a brothel. Then became a private home, then a grog shop or a liquor store, private home again, a Salvation Army boys home. Someone had a bit of change of character there, didn't they? Private home again, and now if you're looking somewhere lovely for lunch or perhaps dinner, this could be your place. Not only beautiful staff, but beautiful food to go with it. We've got lots of local crafts in there. If you do pop in, please say hello. They've shaped our New Zealand history. Patuone was the first recorded centenarian here in New Zealand, well over 100 before he passed. And Tamati was in his early 90s before he passed, and he was a man of war. So 2 great examples of how rich our lives were back in the day. We did live to quite a ripe old age. To the very first branch. And then to my left hand side, one of the last remaining whale chase boats in New Zealand. I just finished taking him on a tour, good boy. He's going to have a look better. Now 6 young men would have been in this 1-ton dinghy, rowing frantically around our Pacific Ocean with another man in front with harpoon in hand. And so a couple of things. When I say young, it was documented men as young as 12 were in this dinghy, and 30% of all men will never return home. Very dangerous industry, whaling. We do have to remind ourselves though that many of our sailing ships back in that period had cabin boys as young as 8. So something to think about, the responsibilities of our children and grandchildren of today in New Zealand, brought here by our French. And Bishop Pompallier was held in very high regard here in New Zealand. In fact, we found out he was buried in a pauper's grave outside of his church cemetery in France. We sent a contingency across to France in the early 1990s requesting that we lift his bones and bring him back to New Zealand where he'll be treasured forever. And the family and the church granted us this permission. We then returned with Bishop Pompallier, visited every mission station that he set up, from Dunedin, our southernmost town, all the way up to here. He is now resting in a small church on the west coast called Pangaru. But what we are looking at is the oldest working industrial building in New Zealand, a stunning example of rammed earth technique. Built in 1842, still operating as a small tannery in the rear, and also does a little bit of printing still as well. This building also holds one of New Zealand's great treasures, a giant printer. This printer has only ever printed in the Māori language since its arrival in New Zealand brand new. And amazing historical gardens as well. Might be worth a visit just to have a look around there. I am biased though because I maintain these grounds. Now this giant printer has only ever printed in the Māori language since its arrival brand new, as I mentioned. The Māori language was developed by one of our great chiefs from out on our coast, Chief Korokoro. He travelled to England and spent 4 years in Cambridge University, 1816 to 1820, developing the written Māori language. And if you've never done a printery tour before, I do encourage you to come back and do this one. It's amazing the language of today that comes from that industry of the past. An amazing history inside this building as well. And then to my left hand side we have the Clendon Cottage, named after James Ready Clendon. Apparently our east coast of Northland reminded them of Hawaii in the 1700s. So if you do get a chance to see Chief of War, starring Jason Momoa, Not only is that our coastline, but that is also our wakas, our canoes, and many of our people, as there were lots of us that supported Jason with this project. Now we do have a normal residential population here in our village of around 900. I've never bothered to count how many unusual ones there are of us. A growing number, I feel. I thought I was the only one. January to the end of May, if not 2. This is the Duke of Marlborough Hotel. This is not the original building. It was burnt down intentionally in 1845 and then again by accident 2 more times in its life, but beautifully refurbished inside and out. Lots of history on its walls and a wonderful bar as well if you so desire. Now this building, or this location, was originally owned by John O. Johnson. He was a man who did 7 years time in our Australian prisons, arrived here in New Zealand in 1827, and you guessed it, he opened up a brothel and a grog shop on this site. Was doing very well for himself. Lovely waterside property. We jump forward to 1840, New Zealand's first capital established on our peninsula, and John O. Johnson applied for New Zealand's first liquor licence. This was granted on the condition he removed again, not a native to New Zealand. This is the Australian Moreton Bay fig tree, one of the first fig trees to be brought to New Zealand, but this one is one of the oldest, 160 plus years of age. And coincidentally right beside New Zealand's first customs house. Now this became the police headquarters here in 1890, and this poor policeman not only had to serve our harbour of Pewharangi Bay of Islands, but also the harbour of Hokianga, a 10-day return trip to the west coast. So when it was time to serve our harbour home for the Kōreraraka cannery. Here in our peninsula we canned mullet, a type of fish found in our harbour that we call kanai, as well as peaches, one of the first fruit trees to be brought to New Zealand. Hopefully not canned in the same. Yes, we do. But also our iconic nocturnal or nighttime bird, the kiwi, live here in great abundance, and a good example of our uniqueness. All the measurement decisions had already been made in the northern hemisphere. We then travelled south and discovered New Zealand. You measure a bird's beak from its nostrils to the tip of its beak. We then found our New Zealand kiwi unique in the world because its nostrils can be found on the tip of its beak. This makes our New Zealand kiwi the shortest beak in the world. Our New Zealand kiwi also produces an egg, 30% of its body size and weight, part of the ratite family. To give you an idea about this, if you're a 66 kilo mum, you're going to have a 20 kilo baby. That's a 6 to 8 year old child.
Come to the top of Flagstaff Hill.
The entire garrison had to relocate themselves to the bottom of this hill. They then chose this as their new Flagstaff site. There was more room. They could build a blockhouse, some fortifications around to help protect it, chop down 3 more times. And this is what led to the Battle of Kōreraraka around 600 years ago. This would have been bare land at that time. Now it's from our manuka tree that you get that beautiful medicinal honey that's so sought after at the moment around the world. Also tastes yummy on toast. Now if you look directly across, you can see what looks like 3 peninsulas above this roofline here. That is actually in reference to your map. These are actually all islands. They are not connected to our mainland. The very first peninsula is your bottom left hand side of your map. Motu Arohia. Motu means island, no matter where you are in New Zealand. Arohia can mean beloved or princess. I chose beloved or beautiful because there's a few too many lads in our butts. Now Motu Arohia is our English connection. 1769 we had Lieutenant James Cook arrive in Cook's Cove, spend 10 days here before he then sailed around our country, arrived in Australia April 1770, mapped the east coast of Australia before returning back to New Zealand to complete his mapping here. The next island over is Moturua Island, the island of caves. This is our French connection, 1772. Marien Dufresne, a French explorer with 2 exploration ships, arrived on our island down in Frenchman's Bay, Waiti. Spent over 3 months here on this island, actually had a hospital and a forge operating on here. Also had an encampment on our mainland collecting... Second big peninsula with a little island off it. That big peninsula is Moturua Island, the island of caves. Our French Connection 1772, Madame Dufresne, as well as the oldest archaeological site in New Zealand. This is Polynesians arriving in our bay over 1,000 years ago. Now we do have various species of dolphins, whales. I do love it when our orcas come into play, as well as our little kororās all playing down in our harbour quite happily. But the reason why I bring you up to this site today is because in 1960, but unfortunately for Captain Robertson and several of his men, they came across that great Chief Kawiti, a very, very experienced warrior, and they lost their lives to his hands at the bottom of this hill. But while they were battling down here, that prominent chief of that period, Honiheke, was busy chopping down that flagpole for the first time. And having upset our British resident, he did promise him that he will never chop it down again. And Honi, being a man of his word, he didn't.
Pompallier Mission, pre-European to 1993. So we're about to do a guide round this place, which printed out Bibles for Catholics in Maori, I think. Anyway, let's see what this is all about.
I don't know what the answer to this is. You possibly won't, because you don't know. Well, you might do. So in those days, 200 years ago, what was the main kind of stuff that people used to cover books? They didn't have any of that nice pretty bits. And that's your first part of your softening process. That's what you're aiming for. Soft, supple leather that you can wrap around a little book. Hold it up and look at the end. That's it. So you can see, you see that? So that's cut so that the paper has access to the ink. The frame encloses 2 A4 pages, we only use 1. So that this must be cut to the frame, and the frame is called the chase. So that's got to be cut to the chase. And it now means something completely different. That's what it meant originally. Oh, I've been useless. They would have fired me. They would have fired me without even thinking about it. Well, I wouldn't have been allowed in here, actually. I'm a lowly female.
What do you think Ryan's going to say? Lose his fingers.
Now, won't mind. And we'll see how they did every page. Letter by letter. Page by page. I'll show you guys in a minute.
Isn't it amazing?
What is it?
It's a house.
Is it a house? What house?
It's this house.
It's this house. It is. It wasn't a house, it was a factory, a printing factory. It became a house after the French had left.
Is that us?
It is. It's huge. I've got your round spines and those old books. And then you've jammed it into, you've made this shoulder.
And now, a quick moment to say hello to someone else, to our beautiful Elle, Kaylee and Brent, and you for giving them gifts of being parents. Like their parents, elderly symbolism. Like their parents have supported and guided them with unconditional love, they too will share the magic of the world with you. You are more a symbol of their love than any words that can be spoken today. And along with you, your mum and dad are already at home. Today, we celebrate.
So that's a view over Russel out into the bay.
I am duly authorised to solemnise marriages. Before you join new marriage, in my present respectively, do you promise to share your hopes and dreams, your achievements and disappointments, all the tenderness and affection through all the varying experiences of your life together? Kaylee and Brent will now take their marriage vows.
They're hot. So do I
Right.
just press this
Okay.
red button?
Just press that red button, then you look at the back and you can see what's happening.
Right.
Okay, so rest it. Swing it right. Okay, go up.
It's come on, but when you press the button to do
No, it's recording now. Okay, that's
Okay.
it. Mon Dieu. Show public. Drink in the Duke of Marlborough. Gents. Right. Okay, let's
wondering
go.
what you were doing.
I'm trying to find the gents. And there's a wedding going on there. Nice pub. Amazing. It's boiling hot and these people are wearing thermal clothing.